Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah. So right now we're in the middle of Cold War, right? So now what's happening during this time, this is going on for a few months. The Quraysh are, threatening the Muslims. The Muslims, they're not fighting back physically yet, but they're harassing these trade caravans and they're collecting information and they're making treaties with other places. So it's kind of like a game of chess or like command and conquer, where you go and you try and grab as many places as you possibly can. So now the Muslims had concluded a few peace treaties already. Intelligence about the activities of Quraysh is coming into Medina, and they know that they're making the Quraysh take detours around whenever they need to go to Syria. But the Quraysh are not budging. They're not interested in making any type of peace with the Muslims. So a few clashes happened here and there when the trade caravans were there, but nobody was ever killed. Okay, so no one was killed. Now we have an incident that takes place. An incident which kind of changes things a little bit. In the month of Rajab, in the second year after Hijrah, the Prophet ﷺ sent Abdullah ibn Jahsh to a place called Nakhla, which is very close to Mecca, around Mecca. And it was an intelligence mission to gather intelligence. So there's several brigades going around the entire Arabia, all over the place, because Quraysh are all over the place as well. So this is like a military game that everyone is playing. So this brigade is on an intelligence mission, and they have 12 armed men. So there's 12 people in that small little army, you can say. So Abdullah, he saw 4 noble men from the Quraysh. They were returning back to Mecca. Now his job was to do what? Gather intelligence. What does he do? He sees them and he sees, look, there's only 4 people. And they're noble people. They're people who probably had fought the Muslims in the past, had tortured them, whatever it was. And he said, you know what, this is a perfect opportunity to attack them. Now it's against the Prophet ﷺ's orders. He goes ahead and he attacks them anyways. Now that one of the other problems was, not only did he attack them, it was the last day of the month of Rajab. Okay? And the month of Rajab is one of the 4 sacred months, which even the pagan Arabs at that time, they were still observing these 4 months, kind of, whenever they felt like it. But generally, they were observing these 4 months, and they're not supposed to be any fighting in these 4 months. So these people are technically protected. This happened to be the last day, right? So no one's supposed to be fighting in this point in time. But he decided to go, to take his own orders, whatever it was. He decided to attack anyways. Perhaps, maybe he didn't realize that there was 1 day left in Rajab and he thought it was the next day. Who knows? No, Allah knows best what exactly happened. But he attacked. When he attacked, he killed a man by the name of Amr ibn al-Hadrami, okay, who was a noble man. They captured 2. Remember, there's 4 of them. They killed 1, Amr ibn al-Hadrami. They captured 2 people, and the 4th guy, he escaped. Meaning that he went and told the Quraysh, look what happened. These Muslims intercepted us, they attacked us, they killed one of our guys, and they captured 2 of them. So Abdullah ibn Jahsh, he goes back to Medina, and he shows the Prophet ﷺ, look what I did. The Prophet ﷺ was really upset with him. He said, I did not order you to do this. So everyone, among all the Muslims, they were all upset at him because he violated the orders. The Prophet ﷺ released the 2 prisoners, gave them all their belongings back, and sent them back to Mecca and freed them. He said, we did not order you to do this, and you did this on your own. And now, the Quraysh, what were they looking for? They were looking for some kind of excuse, right? Something which would give them the edge that to justify attacking Medina anyways. So now they have 2 excuses. One, the Muslims actually attacked a small little tiny group of people, and there's a nobleman there. Number 2, he attacked in the sacred month of Rajab. And now he's going around and telling everyone, look, you know what? The Muslims, they violated Rajab, and look what they did and all of that. As if the Quraysh had never violated Rajab. What they used to do at that time is whenever they felt like, I think we talked about this, whenever they felt like, they wanted to attack somebody, they would go and substitute 1 month and say, okay, we're going to break this month, but we'll make it up in another month. So the other month will become sacred, and we'll just go ahead and break this one. Like kind of playing games, right? So they would used to do this anyways. So what happened? The Prophet ﷺ, returned the prisoners back, but it was not enough. So So the Quraysh found the excuse that they were looking for. They found one excuse that they were looking for. So they began preparations to attack Medina because they wanted to supposedly avenge this guy, Amr al-Hadrami. So around the same time that all of this is happening, a large trade caravan that's led by Abu Sufyan was sent to Syria, and now it's on its way back from Syria, and it has to cross through Medina. So at this time, remember, Abu Sufyan is one of the leaders of the Quraysh, one of the very important people of Quraysh. He had fortified his caravan with about 40 armed soldiers. So he is a very, very heavily guarded caravan. The Prophet ﷺ, he decides he's going to set out himself on this mission with 300 soldiers, okay, to go and attack this caravan that's coming back from Syria. And it's possible that he knew that Medina might have been attacked as well, because 300 soldiers is a lot of soldiers to be taking for a small caravan like this. So Abu Sufyan received news that, these are intelligent people, by the way. These are not like fools. So they're traveling through the desert. Abu Sufyan, while he's traveling, he knows this is Muslim territory coming up. So he sends out scouts to go in front of him to see if anyone's coming. And he pays off some random Bedouin people. So they see that the Muslims have left. Somehow the news gets back to him, Muslims are coming out to intercept your caravan. What does he do? Now imagine he's coming from Syria back. This is Medina, this is Mecca where he needs to reach. He's coming back and the Muslims are going up to meet him to intercept this caravan. He immediately heads west. What is west? The sea, right? So he heads west towards the sea. Why? Is that a smart move? You jump on a boat and you can sail over. You're going to be pretty much safe by the sea, and you're going to drag them out towards the sea. So in the meantime, while he was doing this, he actually evaded the Muslim army. So the Muslims stopped pursuing him. They said he's already gone too fast. Right? He traveled very, very fast by day and by night. The Quraysh had dispatched an army out to Medina. Exactly what their intention was it to protect the caravan only, or was it to actually attack the city of Medina? It's very difficult to see based upon the evidence that we have with us. But one thing that we know for sure is that these two armies are going to meet face to face. 300 Muslims and 1,000 people who are coming from Mecca. Okay, let's continue. So now, as soon as it was confirmed that, look, the Quraysh are coming, the Prophet ﷺ decides to consult with his followers. Should we pursue this caravan or should we head back towards Medina? They could have gone all the way to the Red Sea and just said, we're going after Abu Sufyan. Or should we go back towards Medina and let's deal with this army? So you have a choice. So they said, well, if we leave this, if we pursue, what might happen? They might attack the city of Medina. So Abu Bakr and Umar, they spoke up, both of them, and they said, we're willing to pursue. We're willing to go ahead and pursue this army. The Prophet ﷺ asked the same question again. Right? He asked the same question again. So now the question is, should we fight against this 1,000-man army or not? That's the question. Okay? Abu Bakr responds, let's do it. Umar responds, let's do it. Now here's the thing. Where are Abu Bakr and Umar from? From Mecca, right? So now the Prophet ﷺ, he keeps on asking. He said, what do you guys think? And the Meccans are saying, yeah, we're for it. So what do you guys think? Well, yeah, we're for it. So they realized he's not asking the Meccans. He's trying to ask the people of Medina. He wants to know what the Ansar have to say. Why? Because the Ansar are the one who pledged that they would protect the Prophet ﷺ, but the stipulation meant in the city. If the city is attacked, right? So now this battle may not take place within the city necessarily. It may take place outside of the city. So are we willing to go and fight this army outside of the city, or do we stay inside the city and only wait because you promised that it's only going to be when it's inside the city? That's what was kind of understood. So one of the leaders who represented the Ansar, he understood that the Prophet ﷺ was asking this question. So he responded and he says, O Messenger of Allah, you do whatever you like. We're with you. He says, I swear by Allah, if you wanted to cross the sea and you jump inside the sea, we would jump in right behind you. Whatever you want to do, we're 100% with you. And his statement represents the other Ansar as well. He was one of the leaders of the Ansar. So this is exactly what the Prophet ﷺ was looking for. As soon as he got confirmation that the Ansar are agreeing and they're going to be in as well, they said, okay, fine. We're willing to fight outside the city as well if we have to. Then the Prophet ﷺ decides, okay, fine. we're going to march to Badr. Okay, so they decide we're going to march to a place called Badr. So now what happens? Badr is a village about 80 miles from Medina. So it's quite distant from Medina. And Badr is a place where there's a trade fair that's held every year. So there are people who are going to Badr. People don't really live there, maybe a few Bedouins or something like that. But it's a place where people gather generally. But this time of the year, nobody pretty much is in Badr. Maybe a few, Bedouins or something like that. So they decided that we're going to meet at Badr because it's near Badr because it's a strategic location. So while the Prophet ﷺ was going towards Badr, they stopped at a certain location. Now, one of the companions, Hubab ibn al-Munzir, he asked the question and he said, "O Messenger of Allah, did Allah command you to stop here?" And the Prophet ﷺ said, "No." He said, "Then my advice is we stop over there. We keep on moving. We find the largest well and we camp over there. So what we can do is we get the water and we cut the water supply off from the enemy. This will be a much better strategic move." The Prophet ﷺ, what did he do? Did he say, "Hey, I'm the Prophet, you don't tell me what to do"? No. He said immediately, "Okay, let's move the army." And he moved. Which shows you what? Number one, it shows you that people would ask the Prophet ﷺ, "Is this revelation?" And if it's not revelation, okay, you know what? Here's my advice. And the Prophet ﷺ used to take the advice from other people. And even he used to consult other people, even though he's the Prophet ﷺ himself. So he accepted this as a very important lesson, is that when we try to teach Islam very authoritatively, you say no questions allowed, or no advice, or we don't want to hear what your feedback is, or something like that. If people were giving feedback to the Prophet, then who are we to think that, we're going to be above something like that? So they decided, based upon his suggestion, to relocate to where the wells were. Now, before the Quraysh arrived, the Quraysh have 1,000 people and they're on their way to this area of Medina, and now they know that the Muslims have camped in Badr. So before they arrived, there's some discussion. What should we do now? We got 1,000 people, okay? The caravan of Abu Sufyan is safe. They received the message. Abu Sufyan is in the west towards the sea. They're not pursuing him anymore. What should we do? Now, here's the thing. Should we go to war or should we not go to war? There was a group of people amongst the Quraysh who did not want to go to war. Because there were several reasons, right? Because remember the economic boycott? Not everyone was for it. And in fact, later on, people started standing up and saying, we never agreed to this in the first place. Well, the same thing happened in this case, that there were many people who were reluctant to go to war with the Muslims. What were some of the reasons? Number one, many of the people were direct family members of the Muslims. So that means that they would be going to war with their own family. Even though they didn't like Islam, they did not want to go to war with their own family. They did not want to try to kill their own family members. So that was one of the reasons. The second reason is that the caravan was safe. And they said, you know what, we came out to go and attack Medina. We had this caravan issue, but the caravan is safe. Let's just leave it. Let's just go back home. Number three, one of the leaders of Mecca offered to pay the blood money for Amr ibn al-Hadrami. He says, I will personally pay the blood money for this guy that was killed. So all of the revenge that you guys want for this one guy who was killed and everything, I will take it upon myself. So don't worry, all of that's going to be gone. So that he says, don't worry about that. But what ended up happening is the louder voices among the warmongers, the people who just, who want to speak loud and who want to accuse other people of being wimps and all of that. They started accusing other people, you're a wimp and you're a coward and this and that. Their voices went out and they decided we're going to go to war no matter what. Now there were some people who were still reluctant. So the Zuhra clan, they didn't care what Quraysh said. They said, we don't care. We don't care what you think, what you decide, we're leaving anyways. So one of the clans from Zuhra, they decided, we're leaving anyways. We offered to pay, the people offered to pay the blood money, and you're refusing it, we're out of here. We don't have nothing to do with this. So they left. The Hashim, which is the clan of the Prophet ﷺ from his family, they also were not really, they were very reluctant as well, but they got pressured into doing it as well. Being called cowards and family honor and all of that stuff, they ended up fighting as well. So now if you look, the Quraysh, they were fully armed. 1,000 men, most of them had armor, and they had 100 horses. Horses travel faster than camels. It's very important in war, and they have armor. So they either have chainmail or they have actual metal on their bodies. If you have armor, imagine you're fighting with armor, someone who doesn't have armor. You're more likely to take on at least like 5 or 10 people more than you would normally be able to take on if the other person didn't have any armor. The Muslims had 300 soldiers, very ill-equipped, and they only had two horses. So we're talking about a very, very ill-equipped army. Okay. Now before the battle began, some things happened. One, it started to rain. And this is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it's mentioned in the Quran. So what did it do? It gave the Muslims the opportunity to clean themselves, to perform wudu, maybe take a bath or whatever it is. And for the Quraysh, it caused them more distress because it was slowing them down because they were still traveling. It's getting muddy for them. It's very difficult for them. Also, the Muslim army was overcome by sleep. And this is something that normally you're really excited or something, you can't sleep. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them some help in the form that they fell asleep. Meaning that they're going to be rested for battle now. The other enemy is going to be what? Tired. They're just traveling. Very difficult for them. And they're not going to have access to water when they get there. So the Muslims were fresh in the morning. Everyone was sleeping until dawn, until the morning time, except one person. The Prophet ﷺ. And he stayed awake all night and he kept praying and praying to Allah for victory. So much so that Abu Bakr woke up and he said, O Messenger of Allah, this is enough. This is sufficient. Everything is going to be fine. So he saw how much the Prophet ﷺ was praying and he was feeling, sad for him. So the next morning, the two armies are ready to face each other. It's the month of Ramadan. The verses of fasting had already been revealed. So the Muslims were fasting as well. And this is over a year after migrating to Medina. So the Prophet ﷺ, he arranged the ranks of his army and he made sure each and every single soldier was in position. Where are we right now? Okay, we're here. Okay, so he made sure that the soldiers were in position. Okay, and now the battle begins with 3 duels. So this is the way it used to work. Oftentimes there would be a symbolic fight before the actual battle begins. Now, who are the people who are fighting? Hamza, Ali, and Ubaidah are the 3 Muslims who are fighting. And they're fighting who? They're fighting the relatives of Amr al-Hadrami because he was the one who was killed. So their relatives of Amr, they step forward and they say, we are here for vengeance of Amr. Which is interesting because some people say the Battle of Badr was only about the caravan. It was not about revenge for this guy. Then why would all 3 members of his family step forward? Right, to duel. So they step forward to duel, and the Prophet ﷺ sends out Hamza, sends out Ali, and sends out Ubaidah. They start fighting, one-on-one. All 3 of the Quraysh are killed off. Ubaidah is injured himself, and he ends up dying later on from the wound. But Ali and Hamza, they take care of their own 2 guys. Then, after that, the battle immediately starts. Family members were fighting each other. Arrows are going back and forth. Swords are going back and forth, clanging. Horses are running, horses are falling down. Imagine there's a full-on battle taking place. And the details of some of the incidents that took place, inshallah, will be discussed in the class on companions of the Prophet and how they fought and who did what and who killed who and all of that stuff. So we're not going to get into the details of exactly what happened in the battle. But what ended up happening was, even though the Muslims were physically outnumbered, with the help of Allah, they managed to overcome the Quraysh army, and the Quraysh army began to retreat. How many people were killed out of 1,000? Out of 1,000 people, 70 idolaters were killed, 70 of the Quraysh were killed, and another 70 were taken prisoner. How many Muslims were killed that day? 14. 14 Muslims. Okay? And most of the leaders that day were killed, including some of the really, really bad ones like Abu Jahl and those type of people. Okay? Now what happens? This is the battle. Post-war conduct, and then we'll try and finish this. If you want to look at war, and you want to look at the morality of the people who are fighting, there's 2 things you need to look at. Not just one. There's 3 things you need to look at. Number 1, what are the reasons for going to war? Are they good reasons or bad reasons? Number 2, how do you conduct yourself during war? And number 3, how do you conduct yourself after war with those prisoners? What do you do with them? How do you deal with them? How do you clean up the rest? How do you reconstruct in case it's some kind of modern war or whatever it is? So that's where you can tell what kind of people we're dealing with here. So the prisoners of war under the Muslims, they were handcuffed and they were put under the charge of different Muslim soldiers. Now the Prophet ﷺ ordered that they be treated and they be fed well. The first command was they have to be taken care of properly. Some companions took this so to heart that they even treated their prisoners better than they would treat themselves. So for example, it's been narrated that some of them were given bread while the Muslims themselves ate dates. Now it's known in that society, bread was superior to dates. Because dates were cheaper, you can just pick it up. I mean, Medina is full of dates. Bread takes time, you have to cook it, you have to grind it, you have to pick up the stuff, get it prepared and all of that. So they were giving them the better food than even they themselves were getting. And that's how they used to deal with prisoners. They were even given better clothes to wear than they themselves were wearing. Sometimes they would give them brand new garments to wear. So after the prisoners and the Muslims returned to Medina, Umar, he recommended that all these captives be put to death. We should kill all these prisoners of war. Now, what's his reasoning? It's not a bad reasoning if you think about it. The prisoners of war, if you get rid of them or you ransom them or you send them back to Mecca, they're just going to come and fight you again. And they're going to try and kill you again. It's not over. Their hostility has not ended. So he says, let's kill them. But Abu Bakr's suggestion and some other companions, they suggested that, no, we should ransom these prisoners of war since one, many of them are family members, number one. So we don't want to kill off the family members. And Umar said, look, it doesn't matter. Family or no family, you take care of them. Abu Bakr said, no. Family members, you don't want to kill them. Number two, we could get some of that money from ransom and we could use that to help build our state, build our defense, all of these things. So the Prophet ﷺ decided to accept Abu Bakr's advice. The rich prisoners were ransomed. The ones who had a lot of wealth, they were ransomed, we got money out of them. The ones who couldn't buy their ransom, they were given the opportunity, if you're literate, you teach 10 children or 10 Muslims how to read and write, we'll let you free. So that means that the focus on education that they had, we want Muslims to become literate. We want Muslims to learn. So you teach them, we'll give you freedom if you just do this service. They could have put them as like indentured servants or something like that, they didn't. So in Mecca, what was happening? The Quraysh are furious. The Quraysh are mourning over the people who had died. So the Quraysh they were already hated the Muslims, now they hate the Muslims even more. And imagine mourning ceremonies and people are, at that time they used to rip their clothes in mourning. They would scream, they would rip, like some Muslims unfortunately do, which we're not allowed to do. They would rip their clothes, they would scream, why? And start getting upset and all of these things. They had emotions of sadness and anger mixed together. So they're really, really upset and they promise, we're going to have revenge. In fact, I don't know if I mentioned this part or not. In fact, some of them, Abu Sufyan was one of the few leaders who survived. His form of revenge, he had to make a show because he's like the new leader now. All the big leaders were killed off. Abu Sufyan now is like one of the big leaders of Quraysh now. So he makes a show and he says, I'm not going to take a bath until we get our revenge. That's how, what's the lack of a better term, how hell-bent they were on getting revenge. Imagine you saying, I'm not going to shower for months until I get revenge, just to show people how, meaning it's going to happen right now, right? Really, really, dedicated people. Right? So the news of the Muslim victory started spreading throughout Arabia. And everyone started thinking, wow, the Muslims, this new little group of people, defeated the Quraysh. Remember Quraysh's status throughout Arabia. So before this, most of the Arabs, what did they think? They thought Islam is like this new phenomenon. It's like a new fad that people are into it. And it's just going to die out probably. Small little groups come here and there. Other Arabs were thinking, we're going to just watch them carefully. Let's see if they can beat their enemies and if they can be victorious. In the minds of a lot of people, if this is the last prophet, like he claims to be, then he has to be victorious, right? So we're just going to wait till he wins to see whether he's a true prophet or not. And if he wins, that means he really was the last prophet. So a lot of Arabs were waiting, and now that they see this, the mentality is starting to change. Oh, this guy means business. Like, this is really happening. He didn't just die off like some other guy or something like that. So they started realizing that Muslims were a force to be reckoned with. They were a power to be recognized. So not only did Arabia start recognizing them, the Muslim self-confidence started increasing. They're not going to be the punching bags, and they're not going to be the people who are going to be tortured by Quraysh anymore. Now their status has changed completely. And inshallah, we're going to leave it at that. Any questions? Yes, the verses were revealed in the context about whether or not they should have taken ransom or whether they should have put the prisoners to death. But there's actually a difference of opinion among scholars of tafsir of how to interpret that. Did it mean that they should have actually taken Umar's opinion, or should they actually, does it mean that their intention was primarily wealth and money? Because had it been, if you take the first opinion, it means that the Prophet ﷺ was incorrect in his decision, but Allah allowed that decision to remain. The problematic part is that Allah wouldn't have allowed it to remain if it wasn't intended to be that way. So it was more the intention that people had, like the other Muslims had at that time, than it was that they picked the wrong verdict. So there's two interpretations that scholars give. I know the first one is more prevalent and more common, but there's a second interpretation of those verses as well. Yes, there are Muslims remaining in Mecca still. They were supposed to migrate, but they didn't. Yes, they are more prone, but at the same time, the fact that they're staying, perhaps some of them are secret Muslims, and some of them are well protected by their family. So they're Muslim, but they're still staying, so they're protected by their family. So not all of them are being necessarily tortured. The reason why the ones who stayed in Mecca, right, they had something to gain. That's why they stayed in Mecca. So they're protected, they have a lot of wealth, and they have some clout. So they were ordered. The migration was a command. Every Muslim has to migrate out of Mecca. Not every Muslim obeyed the Prophet ﷺ in this. But they remained Muslims at the same time. And they migrated later. Some of them migrated later. Were there angels? Yes, there were angels in the Battle of Badr, and they were helping the Muslims as well. Exactly. There's a revelation that came. Those who did not migrate, the Prophet ﷺ has no walaya, meaning we can't protect you. We don't have a responsibility towards you if you don't migrate. Yes. Okay, so inshallah we'll convene next week. Inshallah, subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun ala al-mursaleen walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.